Hello everyone and welcome to Talk HR UK from me, Simon Geere at Alexander Lloyd in the HR Recruitment team. This is Season 2, Episode 13, quite frighteningly, and it was recorded way back in the heat wave of 22, a month or so ago, and today we'll be talking about increasing the capability of managers. Now, the guest this week is Steve Woodhouse. Steve is the HR Director at Marsh for the UK and Ireland. I've known Steve quite some time, and obviously he forms part of the leadership team at MMC's operating company from an HR perspective. Now, Steve and I had been having the conversation really over the last 2 years about how the pandemic and remote working had changed how managers need to deliver a great experience for their employees and their staff as leaders. So he's done a fair amount of work at Marsh on how we increase the capability of managers, and I hope you enjoy this episode that does go into some great detail. I will of course catch up with you at the end of the podcast, but I hope you enjoy watching or listening. Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Talk HR UK. Today our guest is Steve Woodhouse, HR Director UK and Ireland for Marsh. Good morning, Steve.
Well, Simon, how are you?
I'm very well, I'm very warm. So we're letting the audience know we're recording this on one of the many UK heat waves. But today, Steve has kindly agreed to give up some of his time. We've been talking across the last 10 years, I think, sadly, but certainly more recently, the last two, regarding some of the changes to HR and methodologies and processes as a result of obviously what's been happening to all of us for the last 2 years. And we decided we'd have a conversation today around increasing the capability of managers, because clearly a lot has changed for the manager in the modern world. And we agreed this would be a good thing to discuss. So Steve, firstly, I mean, what led you to focus on this at Marsh? What do you think needed to change or improve as we've got through the pandemic?
I guess there was a few things, Simon. And some of it was situational a couple of years ago. We went through a pretty big but successful merger with JLT. So we were bringing two very different and distinct cultures together and going through a huge change program. So when we looked at what were going to be some of the success dependencies of both the cultural change and the change program, the capability of our managers to be able to manage through that time of change came up as a critical. So there was an organisational reason for doing it. As you know, I mean, we're a huge organisation, 6,500 people in the UK, 45,000 people globally, and we have battled a long time with the idea of consistency and colleague experience. Right. You know, I talk a lot in our firm about a very technical HR term, which I call boss lottery. You know, you're as lucky as the boss you've got, and you can feel the organisation in very different ways depending on the ability, capability, and quality of your manager. So, as a huge organisation, that consistency is something we've been grappling with for a long time. And the more we look at it, that does come down to managers as being that real consistent point. And thirdly, we were doing some work within the insurance market and with our regulator around our culture. And when we think about how we sustain and build a healthy culture, managers are at the core of that. So they were sort of the business issues. And I guess from an HR perspective, again, we were going through a reasonably sizable HR reorganization. And I think in my time in HR, there's a shift, and there has been a shift, which I think is positive, around HR people doing some of the stuff to HR people supporting leaders to be able to do other things. And I think if we're really going to leverage the value from an HR function, we need to spend more of our time coaching and developing managers rather than jumping in for managers and helping out when they couldn't do it. So there was some business structural reasons, there was some cultural reasons, and there was some internal HR reasons why all roads seem to come to the same place. How do we create great managers?
Excellent. And as you say, that last point particularly resonates and has done for a long time. It's always seemed to be the case that HR people, to a degree, are very, as you say, it's more about teaching someone to fish than doing all the work for them. I remember the cultural differences between a US and a UK firm, and how when I was working in HR, the US firm, HR did everything for everyone. And they were huge HR functions. Where in the UK, very, very different approach.
I think it's only natural, as HR practitioners, most of us want to help and we want to show our expertise, and that's how we do, by jumping in and helping. And lots of managers would rather be helped and have it done for them than do it themselves. So it grew naturally, and I think that's why we sort of said we've got to do something different to make a change.
Definitely. So obviously, with the growth of the hybrid work model, which I think is touching most people who are working in an office, which includes obviously the majority of HR professionals. How do you think that the role of a manager and the skills of a leader have changed with the introduction of the hybrid model coming in over the last sort of 18 months or so?
I think it's been seismic. It's been a massive change. I mean, most of us have grown up in insurance or whatever industry we're in, whatever jobs we do. We've come into a work model that's probably never changed in our lifetime. We've never had to think about, where am I going to go today? What seat do I sit in today? Where's my manager going to be today? Where are my colleagues going to be today? So I think as individuals, the whole future of work is just transforming from where it's been. And leading colleagues through that change is a massive change for people. Again, if I think from look at it from my own personal management perspective, I've always managed remote teams, but it's even more important now, where very rarely is my whole team together. Very rarely do I bump into my team on a regular basis, sitting in the office. So, and also when you think about what our colleagues and employees going through, our own personal lives have changed massively. So I think from a manager's perspective is, how you organize your team and your workloads is you've got to be far more thoughtful about that process now. How you understand, basic things like, how are your team feeling? What's worrying them? What's concerning them? You can't just shout across the desk or bump into someone at the coffee machine and say, how are you this morning, Steve? You've actually got to think about ways to go out, think about different ways to proactively go and do that. And then I think the other thing which we're spending a lot of time thinking about is, well, how do you measure performance now? Used to be able to look across the desk and go, is Steve busy? Is Steve in?
Yeah.
What time does Steve come back from lunch? Whereas now, when you're not seeing people, there's far more thought needs to be going on. Well, if I can't measure them by looking at them, what does it look like? What are the outputs? What is measurable? And I think that's the other critical piece in this. So it's how do you really stay close and get to know your teams, and how do we really know how people are feeling so we can manage them properly? How do we organize our workplace and our teams and our resources in a different way? And then how do we measure that? So those three things I think are a massive change for lots of managers.
Definitely. I'd agree. It's and you already see on things like social media, there are so many different approaches to it, and some applauded and some condemned. There's the invention of this kind of bossware on tech, isn't it? So that you can see when an employee gets up and walks away from their desk at home, which does seem insanity. But it's one way of doing it. There are other people that have moved their entire working model, as you say, purely to outputs. It's like, I don't care when you start, when you finish, whether you stop to, walk your dog or get your washing machine fixed or whatever it is in the middle of the day, as long as, tasks A, B, and C are done by Thursday, I'm happy. And I think every business is going to have to work out its approach, isn't it, as to how that happens.
And I think we have to remind ourselves that, we're, a matter of months, at most a year, into a whole new way of working. It's taken us 50, 60 years to get comfortable with working how we do. We're not going to get it right in 6 months. This is a learning process for everyone, and we're going to do things wrong and we're going to do things right. And I think as an HR function and as an HR profession, we can add real value to this process around giving people insights as to what's working, what's not. really reaching outside of our own organizations and understanding what other people are doing and being the conduit for best practice into an organization, because it generally tends to be the HR teams that are in the middle of those conversations. So the more we can share as a community and we can start learning off each other, the better it's going to be for everyone. And I think the other thing, which is at the core of a lot of this change, is it really embeds a need for trust. Yeah. I think one of the things I'm finding, whether it's trust in the organization, trust in your manager, trust in your colleague, that's probably been the biggest change that I've seen. And I'm not saying in any way that people don't trust people or we haven't had levels of trust, but I think it's actually now the core element of a strong working culture and environment. The conversation will, is Steve working? What's he doing? And it comes out in lots of different conversations. I can remember very early on in the pandemic, I was in conversations about, well, if you put this software on the machine, we can see how many keystrokes people are doing per minute. We can see when their CPU unit turns off. And it's like, well, I can see on paper why that's a good idea, but that's completely contrary to our culture and our trust model. So, you could do that, but would you want to do that? And I think a lot of leaders, and especially very senior leaders, and I have this conversation with my executive team, we've taken some time to go through that personal journey to get used to a different way of working. So having to, and that's another interesting bit from an HR perspective, helping leaders go through their personal journeys first before they can then start deciding on, well, what does that mean for everybody else? Because we all default to what's right for us. And one of the big things for managers and leaders throughout an organization is the most important thing is not what's the right way of working for you, it's what's the right way of working for your business and your teams. You've got to understand that. And that's quite different for managers, because most managers make decisions based on their past experiences and their learnings. You become a great manager because you've got a wealth of learning experience to make the right decision on. This is a subject and a topic way of working, which is completely different to that, because you have no past experience to work back on.
Exactly. We're all winging it to a degree, aren't we? We're all using our best kind of intentions and insights to, there's a degree of hope there, I think, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, the whole pandemic has been a fascinating process for me personally. I've never sat in meetings before where the whole team has gone, we have no idea what we're doing. Literally. Who's done this before? None of us. And that is both an exciting and pretty scary proposition. And I think one that from an HR profession has been and is a massive opportunity for us. I've sat in networking sessions and group sessions with fellow HR people and for years, and they say, we need to be treated strategically. We need to have a seat at the table. Well, we've got that now. We need to demonstrate the value we can give in that seat.
Definitely. That's very well said. So, well, staying with that, I suppose, in terms of some of the pragmatic pieces around this. So what have you tried out at Marsh, perhaps, or what initiatives and processes are you seeing that are helping support managers with these changes? What successes have you had with your change in approach?
Yeah, I think when we've gone through a journey on that, and I think around, again, it's the learnings of the changing culture. If you think back about our historic ways, not just at Marsh, but I think in lots of organizations, a big change happens. Our natural default is tell people what to do. And most colleagues and managers' natural default is please tell me what to do. So we spent a lot of time, and I laugh with my CEO. I think we got up to version 39 of our hybrid working announcement. And then we scrapped it completely. Because we worked out you couldn't come up with a set of rules that covers everybody and covers everything. And by definition, hybrid, remote, flexible working, whatever you call it, works when it's suited to the business condition, the client condition, and the team condition. And you can't make rules for those. So we've been through a journey of wanting to put rules out, and managers cramming for rules. Tell me what to do. Tell me what I need to say. And I guess we've come out the other side of that by going, actually, it's not a rules-based thing. It's a principles-based piece. So what we've spent time doing is spending more time trying to discuss the principles. And for us, a lot of it comes back to culture. So we spend a lot of our time with our leaders, and we've done various sessions throughout the last 2 years where we've pulled our complete leadership base, which is over 400 managers together on Zoom calls and predominantly Zoom, and said, right, okay, first of all, let's talk about the type of culture we're trying to create. Let's talk about the type of working environment we want to create. Let's talk about how we want our colleagues and our clients to experience us. Right. And then we'll start to talk about the principles of flexible working, of hybrid working, and how to manage, because it's the culture and the environment that comes first. Otherwise, how can you assess whether the management tools you're using are the right tools? So we've gone through a journey of telling to discussing. And that was as painful for us as a business and a leadership team as it was for our managers in receiving. That's been a pretty significant journey for us. Right. And then we moved into a discussion perspective, and a bit of a plug, if I may. We've done a lot of work with a company called Mind Gym, who have been really helpful for us in this process. And they coined a phrase in a discussion we had with them around historically management in the past has been like a surgeon. Steve's not very good. I need to go and make him better. If I can't make him better, I need another solution. And Sarah's brilliant, so I need to make sure I've got a next job for Sarah. Our hypothesis is management of the future is more like being a constant gardener than it is being a surgeon. It's regularly tending the soil, regularly checking all the plants are okay, moving stuff around if it's not doing well in the garden, but constant attention all the time. So we talk to our managers now about being, a constant gardener within your team, and we've coined a phrase and a tagline, if you like, which we call cultivating conversations, and we're basing everything around conversations. It's very technical, it's very sophisticated HR, I know, but why don't you have a chat with your colleague? And that in itself is a change for some people, and a lot of our managers, are busy people. And it's interesting. It sounds simple, have a conversation, but when you really delve into it, it starts getting you think about, well, what do I talk about? Am I skilled enough to talk about it? Are we in a culture where my colleagues will talk openly? Have I got enough time? Or what's the structure of my role? Do I want to spend my time doing that? What's my career path? So it sounds very basic, but it really gets to the core of what it is to be a leader in an organization. So we put some guidelines around what our expectations are of managers in that realm. And we've pulled that around 3 key areas. So we say management in Marsh is about 4 C's: having conversations, showing that you care, giving clarity, and helping people connect with their work, their colleagues, and their clients. Right. So we've put that principle and expectation out that being a leader isn't just about having a badge; it's about doing things. And then what we're doing now is a series of what we call, and we, as most organizations have, we have our core processes around performance management, appraisal systems, so all the stuff you'd expect an HR function in a good business to have. What we're just trying to do on a regular basis now is supplement that through a series of what we call nudges. So every month we'll send a nudge out and we'll say, as a manager, why don't you have a conversation about X? If you want to talk about career development, these are some simple things you can do. These are some conversation starters. These are some things you might get back. And what we also do is send the same nudge to every colleague and say, if you're talking to your manager this month and you want to talk about career development, why don't you have a conversation about X and Y? And we try to make those topical to fit in with our key cycle around when we do our talent reviews, when we do our promotion reviews, when we do our sort of 6-monthly appraisal processes. But what that will do is both be topical at the time, because we're all busy and we all want to do these things, but very few people go, I know, I'm just going to go and look on the HR page or the intranet page, which is somewhere else, because I remember about 6 months ago, there was a sheet came out, that just doesn't happen. So just trying to regularly put things at people's fingertips. So it's go, oh yeah, I'm talking to Sarah. I'll chat about that next month. But what it does do, it creates a catalogue of those types of conversations. So you can say, I want to have a conversation with Sarah about X. I'll go and see if there's a nudge to do. So it's not, we have our core pieces around, as you'd expect, training for new managers, middle managers, senior managers. So all that stuff we've always had. But it's how do you make it practical? How do you make it timely? And how do you make it easy? So, and again, this isn't always easy for us as HR practitioners, because we want to show our professionalism and our intellect by making very complicated tools and sophisticated training outputs. But I'm a very, as you know, Simon, you know me for years, I'm a very simple HR person. It's like simple is easy. Basically, exactly. Let's just give someone they can pick up, print it off, have it on their iPad, have it on their phone, and go, oh, there's 3 questions I can do.
I like it. I think, as you say, it's natural in the nicest way. It's what you think, well, actually, because we all know the types. So there's some very, I would say inverted commas, very successful, perhaps commercially successful leaders out there who are challenging people to work for. Do you know what I mean? They're great technically at the job and they can bring people with them through one method or another. But as you say, I think we've all had to experience change, and you're quite right. I think the leader is far more almost, you offer, you're a counsellor, you're an advisor, you guide, you coach. Sometimes you have to lead from the front now, and it's that much harder in a remote environment. But little nudges, as you call them, I think that's fantastic because it keeps it different. You can't always be talking to everyone about everything, can you, as a manager? Yeah, because it never all gets done. And equally, if every week or month or whatever it is that you're formally assessing performance, it's exactly the same, it soon turns into that episode of The Office where he's ticking the middle box every single time, isn't it?
Exactly. And I've been involved and I've initiated hundreds of things across the years. This is our project that's going to change the world, and it does for a week. And it's like, and then you go, didn't we do something 4 years ago on that? Yeah, we sort of did. So one of the other things we grapple with is, how do you turn this sort of stuff into, well, this is just what we do around here. This is just what we do as a manager in our organisation, and it's that habit piece. And habits are not formed by an initiative, an event. They're formed by doing the same things over and over again. So that's a big piece of what we're trying to do, is create those habits within both our managers and our colleagues. So because my view of this is we all have a responsibility on this. As a manager, I have a responsibility to lean in and drive and show I care and connect. But as a colleague, I also have a responsibility to go to my boss and say, can you help me? Or what about? Or we haven't spoken for 6 months. Is that really right? So, we're trying to to support both sides, and just with the end of, if we have 1,000 great conversations every day, that's what's going to change our organisation.
Oh, definitely. And so, how are managers reacting to this change and this focus? How's it landing?
Mixed, I think. If I'm honest, some managers love it. There's some of our managers who do this every day. And this is just what I do. And actually, that was quite handy because it saved me having to think about it. I can now just go and use that. Yeah. There's some of our managers who have wanted to do that, know it's part of what they wanted to do, but either didn't know how to do it or didn't have the time to do it. And I think the nudges and just making it easy is helping them to be able to do that. There's some of our managers, and again, it's part of a culture of our organisation and many organisations. As I said at the start of this, we've grown up being told what to do. So some of our managers feel quite uneasy about it. Well, if I have a conversation about someone's career, what happens if they say, I don't want to work here anymore? What happens when I say to someone, how are you? They go, not very well.
Yeah.
When you say to someone, what do you think of our relationship? well, we haven't really got one. You know, and some managers are scared of going into a conversation when they don't have every answer, because traditionally as managers we feel our job is to have every answer. So there is a chunk of some of our managers who, because we've set this as an expectation now and we are showing them what to do, it's actually got more managers to come to us and go, like, can you help me? I'm not quite sure what to say. And that's a great opportunity for our HR teams to get in and coach and have a conversation and sort of say, well, what do you think they might say? And, you know, and a true facilitating conversation rather than, well, I'm going to give you all the answers, because even the HR person can't do that.
Yeah.
And if I'm brutally honest, we've had some of our managers who go, well, that's not my job.
Yeah.
I'm a manager. I have to get that piece of paper from there to there.
Yeah.
Or my job is to get the client to sign up. And we're having to have some interesting conversations around, well, actually, no, that really isn't your job. You know, and that is a key job, and you're fantastic at it, and that's something we'd love you to do. But let's be clear, if you want to be a manager, these things come with it. And then we have some pretty grown-up conversations about what people's careers might go in different ways. And, you know, I've had some really interesting conversations with people going, look, Steve, I probably shouldn't say this, but I don't really want to do this anymore.
Right.
You know, I love my clients. You know, can I spend all my time with my clients? Of course you can. We'd love you to do that. So yeah, I think it's mixed depending on the sort of the experience base of the manager. And I think, you know, as we said, the whole role of a manager is changing. So you go through the whole range of experiences, and we're still early into this. You know, we're still only sort of 6-8 months into it. You know, has it formed habits? Has it been the way we do things around here? I think it's too early to say, but it's I definitely feel like it feels like a different way to do stuff.
Well, definitely. I think it sounds like you've made a strong start. You've thought your processes through, and as you say, it's going to take time to bed in, but a strong start is a great beginning to it.
And I think also because we're linking the conversations back to our strategy, back to our culture. You know, strong, healthy culture is what differentiates us and any other organisation from their peers. And, you know, our core HR strategy is based around 3 things. If we can create an organisation where everybody feels they belong, everybody feels they have a great manager, everybody understands and can see a career route and believes they can get there, this will be a great place to work. And the manager is the single defining process behind that whole thing, not a great HR strategy I might come up with, not even the fact that we have one of the best HR teams in the business. It's about, what do our managers do with their colleagues every day?
Definitely. That's where the magic happens, so to speak, isn't it? It's in the teams. It's the relationship between the employee and their manager, and how that drives forward. And
it's interesting. It changes the way you think about HR, and it changes the way you think about what makes us successful as an HR team. You know, when you say, you know, your job is to help someone else make the magic happen. It gets you to rethink what you do and how you do it. You know? So that's been has been and is becoming an interesting journey and conversation for us as a team.
You mentioned culture in that last piece. I mean, what every business is, I mean, it's all anyone's talking about at the moment, is how do we improve or transform or create, in some cases, culture in the new way of working. What changes have you seen culturally at Marsh as a result of remote working, and, you know, how are you measuring it? Are there any other things you're putting in place? Yeah,
it's interesting. We do a range of surveys as most companies do, probably too many if I'm honest. But every year we do a culture survey, which is a survey which looks at very specific questions around our culture and what's driving our culture. We did it in May this year. We had over 80% of our organisation respond. And one of the questions we put in this year around a series of questions was around hybrid flexible working. And 84% of the people who responded said they thought flexible working had been positive for them personally. 78% said they thought it had been positive for inclusivity within our organisation, which surprised me. But interestingly, 48% of those responded said that they had found collaboration with colleagues and clients harder in a flexible working environment. So we talk about flexible working being a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It's, it has given people, in some cases, it's given people their lives back. It's given people a chance to think about work in a different way. I had a conversation with a young mother returning, one of our maternity returners last week. And in her view, flexible working has allowed her to keep her career going. If she hadn't had the opportunity to work flexibly, she wouldn't have come back to the workplace.
Right.
And I think sometimes that's why, strangely, inclusivity has increased, because flexible working is seen for everybody. Whereas predominantly in the past, it may have been seen as a working mother, carer type thing. It's now, but it's just the way we work. I'm not asking for anything special. And I think when I talk to a lot of our colleagues, especially a lot of our female colleagues, they say, well, it's just normal now. I don't feel different because I want to work from home on a Thursday. So I think culturally it's been very good from that perspective. I think the long-term success and the real long-term success measure is around that trust bit.
Yeah.
That I said before, because I think that is a defining part of any company's culture, is trust at the center of it. And flexible working is a pretty good way to test whether that trust is there. Do I trust Steve to be at home and not be in front of me every 5 minutes? But definitely, and we don't have many answers yet, but that whole piece around how do you make collaboration better, that's important. And I've seen that the conversation, even over the last few months, change from, well, if collaboration is not great, we need to get people in the office more. It's not, the answer isn't numbers of days in the office. No, the answer is different ways to think about it. So I've seen a range of things, full teams coming in on the same day to do stuff. People saying when we have a management meeting, everyone comes in for it. Just on my team, even things we do now that we never did before, like we have a short call every Friday at 5:30. No work conversations allowed. How you been? What you doing? Pre-pandemic, we wouldn't have talked as a team like that. We're far closer as a team through those sorts of things, and I think that's a big thing that HR functions and LinkedIn across the business, because it's not just an HR thing, is how do we use technology? How do we think about our processes? How do we think about why we come into the office? Being more thoughtful about when you're in. And again, we talk about, is it a heads up day, a heads down day, or a heads together day? Is it a heads up day because I'm with clients and I need to be up and I need to be talking to people. So I need to be around probably other people's offices. It's a heads down day. I'm really thinking about, I've got to get this report done. So I'm probably going to work from home that day because that's where I get my best thinking done. Yeah. Actually, it's a heads together day because we need to collaborate. I need to get the team together. We're only going to work out this client pitch if we're all in a room working it through. So being quite thoughtful about the tasks you do and where you do them, I think will go a lot towards helping collaboration. But it's a journey. This is going to take us multiple years to get right.
Yeah, definitely. Some of those initiatives, though, sound fantastic. I like that. Heads up, heads down, heads together. That's might borrow that.
I can't remember. It came up in one of the, I think it was someone from our ops team come up with it. And it was just a good way to say to people, how do you put tasks in particular categories? Where do I do that? And it's very simple. Yeah. But people go, I'm having a heads down day. And rather than, well, I'm at home today because I'm having a heads down day. So what do I want? What are my heads down topics?
It's interesting, and it's funny. There was a report this week. I think it was research done at JLL, and they said what people were struggling with was they wanted to come, to a degree, wanted to come back to the office to enjoy the collaboration, but they needed focus time or private time during that. Otherwise, they couldn't get the heads down stuff done, and they, at the time it wasn't working for them to have such specific days. They want to come in, collaborate, but between 2 and 4 they had to get this done, and they're setting up little places in the office where you can almost sneak off to and disappear and get your work done. And I just thought even that's it's like working from home from work.
I mean, our London office is moving back to our old office by Tower of London, and we spent a lot of time creating a smart office, and we do that across our whole network of different workspaces for different things. And as much as you try, and we spent a lot of time and effort trying to get that right. And when we're back in a couple of weeks, it will be a fantastic office.
Right.
It's difficult to provide every workspace for every person to be able to work in every way. So I think by definition, we're going to have to get used to working in different places.
Yeah.
It's just thinking about what is the best place to do the types of tasks and work we need to do. Because, I think just from a personal perspective, I used to look at my diary and go, what's on today?
Yeah.
Now I'm starting to go, what do I want to do this week? Where do I want to be?
Where am I?
Where's the best place? And then that drives where I am, as opposed to, we've got to get used to us driving our diaries rather than our diaries driving us.
100%. Well, you've just answered. You give me one of the answers to my last question, actually, which is, I guess, what successes have you had in keeping people connected? How are you doing it? And obviously, site strategy is one of them. And I remember you saying some time ago you were moving back to Tower Place, and I look forward to seeing that. We'll have to grab a coffee. But what other things have you done to try and keep people connected as best you can? During this change to hybrid working.
I think a few things. I mean, when we first went into effectively home working straight after COVID, we really tried to do a lot more communication, and probably overloaded the communication. As an executive team, we were doing, myself, our CEO, and other members of our exec team, we were doing weekly town halls,
right?
Which is actually quite one of the great things Zoom brings you. Is it's easier to do one. You can jump on a Zoom. You can be sat at home. You can get people from right around the country, right around the globe. So we use that a lot. I must admit, I'm not sure what I'm going to be like when I'm, we do our Zooms and we could have like 2,000-3,000 people on it. I'm not sure what I'm going to be like standing in a room in front of 400 people again when I next have to do it, or I haven't got my notes strewn all over my desk to be able to look very smart and professional.
You'll be all right. Muscle memory, it'll all come back.
And we do a lot of town halls, a lot of Zoom. I mean, Zoom again is a double-edged sword, but I think video conferencing, Zoom, Teams, whatever you call it, has really helped. We trying to be more structured about when you come into the office. We're also trying to think about just different things you can do to bring people together, perhaps not in the office. We're quite a community-based organisation. We do a lot of work for our key charities. Our charity this year is a fantastic charity called Ambitious About Autism, which is really working around how do you get young people with autism into the workplace. And we've done things like we're doing I shouldn't call it a 5K run, because it's not a 5K run. It's just do 5K in whatever way you can do it. Walk, crawl, run, drive, whatever. And we're encouraging people to come together in their town, not in their office. And we did some treasure hunts, for Ambitious About Autism around, and you could do them virtually wherever you were. And we had people, doing it from Perth, Dundee, Aberdeen, down to Bristol and Plymouth and Exeter, doing the same treasure hunt, just in their own towns. So, trying to find other ways to say, well, you don't just have to come and meet your work colleagues to do work. But it's a constant thing that we're thinking about, is how do you start to do that? And that definitely isn't a muscle memory we've developed yet. No. It has to be at the minute a really sort of thoughtful process of what's going to help. It was funny, I was talking to someone the other week, and I asked them the question, how are you getting people back into the office? And their answer was bribe them with alcohol. Team drinks every Thursday. Okay, I can see that, but I'm not sure that's long-term sustainable.
Not, as you say, for a short period, perhaps.
Yeah. But I think, it's an interesting question, and I don't want to give a glib answer, but it probably is still one of the biggest challenges that we face is how do we, the core of a culture is collaboration and common purpose. And, it's easy for someone like me who's been in an organisation a while, who knows their way around the organisation, who has a network. But I was talking to our new graduates and apprentices this week, and it's a lot harder for them coming into an office. They don't know the culture. They don't know the people. Most people learn from others. Yeah. And it's interesting when I look at the people who are in and not in. Often it's our younger colleagues that we're in, and it's our older, more experienced colleagues who have an office, can work from home, know what they're doing, don't need anyone's help. But I talk again a lot to our leaders around, we've all been very lucky to have people who've given up their time to help us become the leaders we are. We have a moral obligation now to give that back. And from a leadership perspective, you may not have to be in to do your job if you think about your job as a task. But if you think about your job as managing your team and cultivating the leaders and the client people and the colleagues of the future, you have an obligation to be in for them. Yeah. So I think that's another piece that we're trying to work through, is around how do we make sure the right blend of people are in? Because, learning isn't just about going on a course or doing a bit of distance learning on a PC. Learning is about being around work when it's done. And that again, that is another challenge that I think is one of the big ones we'll be facing over the next few years.
Definitely. It's going to be an interesting approach. And I wonder, we've been talking about this to a few of our clients, the concept of leadership on a broader scale. You'll have technical experts that are available to all who are in the office, but their line manager may or may not be in that day, and maybe virtual or maybe sat next to them, but there'll be someone who can answer things like system questions, IT issues, almost the basic kind of hygiene stuff that gets you through a problem. But no, it's interesting.
Yeah. And how do you create self-service when it doesn't just become the only way to get an answer? That's part of I think the evolving way of work.
Oh, definitely. Hey, Steve, thank you so much for giving me this time. It's been great to talk to you, and really lovely to have someone prepared to be very open about some of the practical things you're doing, because that's what I'm always trying to get from these conversations is, what did you do? Did it work? And you've done a brilliant job of that today. So, cool. Steve Woodhouse, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Simon. Great chat.
Pleasure. Speak to you
Bye.
Soon. Cheers. Thank you for watching or listening our podcast today, Series 2, Episode 13 of Talk HR UK. Thank you hugely to our guest, Steve Woodhouse, the HR Director at Marsh. And thank you to you, our watchers and listeners, for taking the time to hopefully gain some useful insights into the area of increasing the capability of managers. Now, all previous episodes are, of course, available on the Alexander Lloyd YouTube channel to watch, or you can listen on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. And of course, I will be making a fair noise on LinkedIn about this particular episode, so you should be able to find us easily. Do like and subscribe to keep in touch for future episodes. As always, I've been Simon Geere, looking after all things HR recruitment at Alexander Lloyd, and I hope to see you next time. Many thanks.